right. I was thinking last night about music and math, and meditation, and um, this concept of non-commutativity, non-commutative, and George Musser. Actually, I have his book. It's called Spooky Action at a Distance, and he he's a science writer, a science journalist, and he's on the internet a lot with articles and interviews. And so he describes music as a fourth dimension of space because he said that sound waves physically are overlapping in space as three-dimensional waves. But a musician will hear the different frequencies as a physical difference, as in like a spatial difference. And he explained it based on the wavelength. So if you have like the concept of pitch with like if you change the music interval from C to D, the difference in wavelength is, I think he said 14 centimeters. And so even though the waves are overlapping in space, the musician will hear that as a visual spatial distance. And so the higher frequency is, perceived as a visual distance. And he says this is like a fourth dimension of space, this concept of pitch. And then he tries to explain that, the universe is based on that same kind of fourth dimension. But the problem is that if you really train in music from a young age, then it's shown that your corpus callosum is significantly larger. And also, if you train in music theory, that you don't think of music as a spatial distance. There's the concept of non-commutativity in music is only explained by Alan Kahn, the Fields Medal math professor. And so, as a concept in music as mathematics, it's very elusive. And so the secret power of music as meditation is then lost because it can't be explained, because people don't understand non-commutativity. So George Musser, he did an interview with Professor Basil J. Hiley, and Professor there. I didn't. I read the whole thing, but if I saved this one exchange because Professor Basil, I think his name's pronounced Basil actually. I think because in English, in British English, they say Basil. I think I'm sorry, I can never say Basil. Basil. Anyway, he just says it's noncommutativity. Noncommutativity. And so George Musser, he's written, a whole book about quantum entanglement, but he never realized that non-commutativity is the secret to why quantum entanglement already exists as non-locality. And Basil, or Professor Hiley, I'll just call him Professor Hiley, he says, Basil, sorry, I've always, he, he says you have to think of non-commutativity as a process in time. So it's not just that momentum and position are non-commutative. So, A times B doesn't equal B times A. But rather that the A has a one, a subset, one and subset 2 and subset 3, and the B has a similarly a 1 and a subset 2 and a subset 3. These are not just static variables. They're algebraic processes that change as you manipulate the variables in time in the quantum algebra. And so this is the same truth if you're doing music theory. So the whole point in terms of music, it's based on listening. Now, most people, when they learn music theory, they learn hertz, HERTZ, as frequency, and then they learn wavelength, and then they'll learn equal tempered tuning, which is the basis of frequency. It actually originates, the concept of frequency in science is from music theory originally. And people don't understand that the whole concept of irrational number in mathematics is actually from music theory. But they get it switched around. They learn music theory as irrational mathematics without realizing that, in fact, originally music was non-commutativity. And the thing about music as non-commutativity is that it's based on listening. It's not based on an external measurement. And so if you're training in music from a young age, you're just doing listening. And when you start to learn music theory, then you approach number as based on time and not space. And so George Musser, or Musser, he's wrong. I mean, it's definitely true that you experience, if you're listening to music, you'll experience frequency as a spatial distance. you'll say, oh, that it's based on relative pitch. So the concept of relative pitch is within equal tempered tuning because you have polyphony. And this is why music doesn't use Western tuning is considered simplistic because you don't have polyphony from the equal tempered tuning. So you don't have as many chords. You might just have two notes compared to each other. So when Alon Khan talks about chords in terms of music and noncommutativity and mathematics, and of course the word chord in geometry, it refers to like a string with 2 points to it, and so we think of like the monochord in Pythagoras supposedly used a monochord, which would be like one string, and you have 2 points at the end of it to attach the chord. Whether he actually used that or not, I don't think there's any real evidence that he used it, but or he probably didn't even exist as a person. I don't know, maybe. Anyway, it's sort of a play on words because you have, when we think of a chord in music, it's usually 3 notes, but when Alon Khan talks about a chord in music, he's talking about 2 notes being non-commutative. And so this is all based on the concept of the one. What is the one? In music, it's root tonic. So even like if you, in Indian, like South Asian Indian music, you use a drone. So here you just have 2 notes that are played together. But the whole point, again, is that the difference in frequency as pitch is based on the timing as a process. So the first note that you hear is the root tonic as the 1, and which means like the octave would be the 2 as because it's the same pitch and it's an inherent overtone. But if you then play a perfect fourth above in frequency above the 1, in Indian music theory, they recognize that this cannot occur as a natural overtone, as the natural resonance. So that immediately changes the 1 into a 3 because the perfect fourth now becomes the new 1. Even the ratio is 3 to 4, but the pitch, because of the timing, with the 3 as the first, now it's if the second note is a perfect fourth, then all of a sudden what you heard as the first root tonic now becomes a 3 in terms of the pitch, and the second note becomes the new 1 as the octave, with the undertone as a phantom tonic. So I referenced these music theorists saying that the perfect fifth is actually the phantom tonic undertone of the perfect fourth. And that concept of the phantom tonic is also called the quantum undertone, where there was a electrical engineer in Greece. He used this concept of the quantum undertone, and he tried to explain it with projective geometry from ancient Greece. And the idea of projective geometries is you're relying on like a higher dimension as infinity. I don't get all the details, but so like like the Klein bottle, like the full lotus is the secret of the full lotus position is actually the Klein bottle, which it's actually four dimensions in three. So you can never see the Klein bottle, and that's the truth of music theory, that it's actually a like a just like the Klein bottle's a Mobius strip, but in three dimensions. It's actually like two Mobius strips in three dimensions, and so the music theory as non-commutativity is the same thing, where it's this twisted space that cannot be seen visually. And so when George Musser tries to use pitch as a fourth dimension of space, he's not understanding that actually musicians, based on listening alone, if they're honest, they will. This is the secret of the blues music, because you have that phantom tonic of the perfect fourth from the perfect fifth as the undertone, and because it changes the value of the one into the three by changing the perfect fourth into the octave of the two. So you have this eternal transformation of energy, and it can only be understood through listening, and eventually that leads to meditation. Because like if you memorize music, you can play it with your eyes closed, and that's so then you're meditating without calling it meditation. And so it's a very simple concept, because when we think of numbers as like addition or multiplication, we think of subtraction and division. We think of it as a commutative, but when in Western math, the concept of proportion is actually a ratio of ratios, and in order to have a ratio of ratios, you need to have an invariant, a constant invariant. And so so you can have this is from music theory, but it all comes back to what is the one as the root tonic, because what Western music does is it sets the octave as the invariant scale as symmetry, And so George Musser is basically he's he's trying to claim that there's this inherent symmetry as this spatial fourth dimension that creates, frequency and wavelength from the octave. But in fact, the octave, due to noncommutativity, is always changing as asymmetry. It's not symmetric. So, and because it's a process in algebra, quantum algebra, from the inner cross products of the matrices. So Alon Khan is the only mathematician that has explained this truth of music, and he himself started music training at the age of 5, because his grandmother was a piano teacher. And of course, how many musicians are gonna study Alon Khan's lecture on music of the spheres, the music of the quantum spheres? Instead, the music theorists, they want to, they learn by rote. They want to just treat music as an external training, but music fundamentally is not an external training because it's based on listening. And so all these like music channels, they're teaching Western music theory that assumes a symmetric spatial measurement. And so I had to like reverse engineer my own experience in music. And due to my experience, when I was 16 years old, I noticed a logical error in Western music theory. And because of my experience, and this is basically like the truth of blues music also, this experience. And I discovered, noncommutativity that explains the truth of music theory and also meditation. And so it's hard enough to understand non-commutativity from the perspective of music theory, but it's even more difficult to understand that the truth of non-commutativity is also meditation. This is what Eddie Oceans understood. He understood that, and he called it quantum psychology, as the secret of Neigong. Neigong is the Taoist alchemy, as standing internal martial arts. And so it's a very unique way of explaining reality, because it's due to music training, but our culture is all visually dominant. Everything is visual because when you're relying on technology, that's an external tool, and so this is the big difference. But if we look at what humans are biologically, music was dominant, and even like human language is more musical. The older the language is, the more musical it is, and our original human cultures had music as the central focus of the human culture. And so it's even from before we developed human language. So that's why it's almost kind of pointless to even talk about it. But the since we're so dominated now by technology, then we've lost that. We're visually dominant, and we lost that connection to the truth of music as meditation. And so that has consequences like biological annihilation, which is what life on Earth is now experiencing due to this ancient secret that got lost. And so the irony is that music is the greatest mass mind control. So if you consider yourself a musician, you're going to be emotionally attached to the wrong music theory from based on logarithms and symmetry of space. Because of course music is not just mathematics, it is the language of emotion. And meditation is also the power of emotional transformation that then leads to paranormal and spiritual phenomenon. And this is what Olivier Costa de Beauregard focused on, the paranormal as proven as precognition of time from the future, which with negative frequency and reverse time. And this Basil J. Hiley, he uses music in this sense where he says, like, if you're learning a piece of music, you do it like if you look at a score of music written down, the notation, you're learning the future at the same time as the past, because the music, when it's played out, from the past to the future, but you're anticipating the future is already built in to the past. And the meaning of the music is based on that temporal relation to the root tonic. And that's what makes it music, is the timing, and um and that has to do with memory as well. So when we have memory based on frequency, then we can remember as a visual, like a holographic visual memory that's right brain dominant. And normally the right brain will be subconscious with our eyes open. As soon as we open our eyes, then the subconscious is in control. But if we close our eyes and meditate, then our subconscious can become super conscious from the future. And this is what Olivier Costa de Beauregard is arguing in detail based on relativistic quantum physics about the paranormal. So if you read his Wikipedia page, it makes no mention of the paranormal because Wikipedia is against the paranormal. But if you actually read Olivier Costa de Beauregard's papers in his book, it's all about the paranormal. Or I mean, it's not all about, but it's definitely every paper discusses how the paranormal is de facto proven real as precognition. So I'm just really thankful for these scientists that understand non-commutativity as asymmetric time, whether it's Roger Penrose or Alon Khan or Basil J. Hiley or Lou Kaufman or Eddie Oceans, who's no longer alive, and Olivier Costa de Beauregard. And there's a few others that I've mentioned before, but then you can get someone like George Musser or whatever user, and he's, he has a career. He has a career as a science journalist, and almost all of science is based on symmetry, and it's like they're obsessed with symmetry this, symmetry that. It's all from Plato, but it's wrong. It's been proven wrong by non-commutativity. So Basil J. Hiley was like, he told George Musser, non-commutativity. You gotta study it. It's like, and so I don't know. I mean, I guess because I studied music from a young age, Alon Khan, he says, he publishes music, he's still into his, he still emphasizes music, and he's not against Western music, but he's just saying, the secret truth of Western music is non-commutativity. So that changes how you listen to even Western music. And so I listen to Western music now. I used to not want to listen to it, but because I understand since I've studied Alon Khan, that I can understand Western music differently. I mean, it's part of non-commutativity. So we want to think of number as tied, like the idea of proportion as a constant invariant. It's that's from the Platonic concept of unit. And what Plato originally argued as this unit is from two-ness as symmetry. And that's what the geometric continuum is based on. But the Gödel's incompleteness theorem in set theory, debunked this. The geometric continuum is, so it's inconsistent logically and incomplete. The understanding of math will always be outside of the axioms as calculations. And so this is all goes back to music theory and what the one is compared to the two is the octave, and then the three and the four. And the idea of proportion needing a constant invariant as a unit assumes a materialistic origin of reality. You measure something externally, and when you do that, you have to measure time differently than frequency. And so in order to convert time into frequency and vice versa, in science it's called time frequency uncertainty, because it takes a certain amount of time to make the conversion. But that's not true in music as listening. Science has proven that musicians can listen up to 10 times faster than the supposed limit of time frequency uncertainty. And so the time frequency uncertainty is based on measuring time as a spatial distance. And so science assumes that time does not exist until it's measured by some scientist. And that it's like totally, but I mean, you got certain scientists are arguing that time really does exist. And this is like Lee Smolin. He was a student of the same quantum mechanics professor that I had, Herbert J. Bernstein. And of course, Roger Penrose, he argues, time, not only does time exist, but it's asymmetric and non-commutative. And the same with Basil J. Hiley, the collaborator of David Bohm. And so anyway, the constant invariant as non-commutativity is also non-local, with the future and the past overlapping. And this is the true ether that's non-local. And it's what Roger Penrose calls proto-consciousness. And As Alan Khan explains, it's only seemingly random. It appears to be random because science is limited by the speed of light as an external measurement for linear causality. But in terms of pure number on its own, the inner cross products of the matrices are a cycle that never repeats, but it's a cycle. So that's why, as Alan Khan explains, the discrete numbers as noncommutativity are more dense than the geometric continuum of real numbers. And this is a crucial key point of noncommutativity. It's what Pythagoras was originally teaching. That's the secret of his teaching. That, whenever somebody learns about Pythagoras, they're actually learning a lie from Philolaus and Archytas and Plato. Nobody's heard of Archytas and Philolaus, hardly anybody, but everybody knows about Plato. And so the original constant invariant proportion is the future and the past overlapping. And it changes its value based on changing the direction in time relative to the one. So in that case, the zero does not exist. And instead, infinity, does exist, but not zero. And the infinity is time itself. And this is what Alan Khan calls it primitive time, and Roger Penrose calls it fundamental time, and Luke Hoffman calls it primordial time. And so this time is the imaginary number, the square root of -1, that is non-commutative relative to the frequency of in the matrices, the inner cross product of the matrices. So the spectral distance is based on this non-local, non-commutative frequency. And that's how you get the negative resonance as a negative frequency and reverse time. And Louis de Broglie figured this out originally with his law of phase harmony. So that's the secret, and all we can do is meditate to actually experience this secret, or practice music on a deep level, listening to music on a deep level, with our body as the musical instrument. Then that becomes meditation, and then you can access this reverse time energy that they also call it negentropy, negative entropy. It's also anti-gravity, and eventually it causes some levitation and bilocation. And so I'll leave it at that. Thanks.